A river is supposed to hide what it takes, but when the Danube drops, World War II begins to reappear. Mud replaces current, banks widen, and where there should be water, rusted metal begins to show through. At first, the shapes can seem almost impossible. Broken hulls, jagged ribs, plates of iron catching the sun from a riverbed that, on any normal day, would be underwater. They are not rising because someone opened a vault. They are appearing because the river has fallen. That is the mystery at the center of this story. Drought is not only revealing a riverbed, it is revealing fragments of a war that many people assumed had been sealed beneath the surface for generations. Some of what we can say is clear. Low water can expose objects hidden in the Danube, but many of the details need caution. Which wrecks are being seen? What exactly were they? How did they sink? And how much of the story is record, memory, theory, or speculation? This is not a story about a secret suddenly solved. It is an investigation into how history survives underwater and why the past becomes visible only when the present dries out. If these ships were sunk decades ago, why are they becoming visible now? And what else could still be under the river? To understand why the Danube can reveal warships, we first have to understand how it can hide them. The Danube is not just a river on a map. It is one of Europe's great corridors, a route that has carried trade, armies, fuel, grain, passengers, and rumors across borders for centuries. Towns grew beside it because the water moved people and goods. Empires measured it, soldiers crossed it, barges depended on it, and because so much human activity passed through this channel, the river became more than scenery. It became infrastructure, frontier, and witness. That is why a wreck in the Danube is different from a wreck on an empty seabed. At sea, a ship can vanish into depth. In a river, it can vanish into use. Boats keep passing, banks shift, mud gathers, new generations learn the bends and shoals without always knowing what lies beneath them. A hull that once broke the surface can be pressed down by sediment, hidden by cloudy water, or disguised as part of the riverbed itself. Rivers are not still museums. They are moving systems. Sediment settles in one season and is stripped away in another. Channels can migrate. Sandbars form and disappear. Floods can cover wreckage with silt, while low water can uncover iron, wood, cables, ribs, and shapes that suddenly look artificial. The same object may be invisible for years, then appear in a drought as if it has risen on its own. In reality, the river has simply changed the frame around it. The Second World War behind these wrecks also has to be handled carefully. Across Europe, vessels ended up in rivers for different reasons. Some were damaged in fighting. Some may have been abandoned during retreat. Some were deliberately sunk, a practice known as scuttling, to block a route, prevent capture, or dispose of unusable craft. Bombing and military movement could also leave debris in waterways, but those are categories, not proof. For any specific Danube wreck, the exact story depends on verified records, local archives, physical inspection, and careful dating. What is confirmed in broad terms is the pattern. When the river drops, objects hidden by the Danube can become visible again. What remains uncertain are the names, dates, identities, and circumstances attached to each object. This matters because low water does not automatically reveal a warship. It may reveal a barge, a support vessel, a civilian craft, scrap metal, or a structure that only looks military from a distance. The mystery is powerful, but it has to be separated from certainty. A wreck in the sea can disappear into depth. A wreck in a river can disappear into ordinary life. So how does a ship become part of a riverbed? The mechanism is almost brutally simple. A river hides objects because water gives it depth, glare, movement, and darkness. Lower the water, and that cover begins to fail. During periods of low water on the Danube, shapes that were once below the surface can start to interrupt the river again. A line of rust appears where a wake should be. A curved plate catches the sun. Something that looked like a ripple becomes the edge of a hull. What was previously known only to river pilots, local authorities, historians, or people who work along the banks can suddenly become visible to everyone. That distinction matters. When a wreck appears in drought footage, it does not always mean the wreck has been discovered for the first time. Some objects in major rivers are already marked, mapped, remembered, or suspected. They may be known hazards, old salvage problems, or the subject of local stories passed down for decades. The shock comes from the change in visibility. The river has not necessarily revealed a secret no human has ever known. It has taken something that was hidden in plain sight and made it impossible to ignore. This is why the images feel so strange. The Danube is normally an active landscape. It carries traffic, reflects bridges, divides and connects countries, and looks, from the bank, like a living border of water. But when the level falls far enough, the scene changes character. Mud replaces current. Sandbars push into the channel. The ordinary surface breaks apart, and the riverbed begins to look less like nature and more like evidence. In that exposed space, rusted metal has a different meaning. It is no longer just debris under a brown surface. It becomes a physical clue from a violent century. The viewer sees a shape and immediately asks questions. Was it a warship, a barge, a support vessel, or something misidentified from a distance? Was it sunk deliberately, damaged in combat, abandoned, or later moved by the river itself? Without verified records for each object, those questions have to stay questions, but the uncertainty is part of the pull. The drought does not hand us a finished answer. It opens a temporary file. That is also why this story matters now. Recent attention has grown around the link between low water and visible wartime wreckage, but this is not a subject that should be inflated with unsupported claims. Some reports may focus on confirmed wrecks. Others may rely on dramatic images, local memory, or assumptions about what the metal must be. A responsible version of the story has to move slowly, separating what is visible from what is proven. Still, even with caution, the basic pattern is powerful. Drought conditions can lower the river enough to expose objects that generations have floated over. For a short time, the Danube stops acting like a curtain and starts acting like an archive, and if drought reveals the ships, it may also reveal the problem. These wrecks are not just history. They can become obstacles, hazards, heritage questions, and legal disputes waiting in the mud. Now the story moves from water to war. A ship can sink in minutes, but the argument over what to do with it can last for generations. To understand the wrecks that appear when Danube water falls, we have to move carefully. The tempting version of the story is simple. There was a battle, ships went down, and the river swallowed them. But wartime rivers are usually messier than that. A vessel can end up underwater because it was damaged, because it ran aground, because it was abandoned. It could no longer move, or because its own crew chose to sink it. That last possibility is called scuttling. In plain terms, scuttling means sinking your own vessel on purpose. It can sound strange at first. Why destroy something so valuable? But in war, a ship is not only a machine, it is a route, a tool, a floating resource, and sometimes an obstacle. A crew might scuttle a vessel to keep it from being captured. Military planners might sink vessels to block a passage. A damaged craft might be sent to the bottom because moving it is no longer practical. Those are plausible military reasons. They are not proof for any single wreck until the specific record is checked. In a story like this, there are several layers of truth, and they should not be mixed together. First, there are confirmed records, such as documents, official reports, salvage files, survey maps, verified investigations that identify what a wreck is and how it got there. Second, there is plausible historical logic, the kind of decision that would make sense during retreat, collapse, bombardment, or confusion. Third, there is local memory, stories passed through families, river workers, fishermen, and people who grew up near the water. And then there is speculation, the part that fills the gaps when metal is visible but the paperwork is missing. The Danube makes these categories difficult to keep apart because the river has never been a still archive. It moves, it covers, it shifts mud from one place to another. It hides the outline of a hull until only a strange angle of iron remains. Then, during low water, that same object can suddenly look dramatic and intentional, as if it has just arrived from the past. But the wreck did not return. The cover around it simply thinned. That is why the exposed ships feel so uncanny. They are not ruins behind a rope in a museum. They are not polished memorials with labels and dates. They are fragments inside an ordinary landscape. One season, the river looks like traffic, trade, and weather. Another season, rusted forms break through the surface and remind everyone that this same corridor once carried fear, retreat, and military pressure. The mystery here does not require a hidden conspiracy. In fact, the more unsettling truth may be more ordinary. Europe did not forget the war because no one cared. It also forgot because daily life needed the river to keep being a river. Barges had to move. Towns had to rebuild. Borders changed. Generations passed. What could not be removed, explained, or made safe in the moment could settle into mud and become part of the background. And once that happens, every exposed wreck becomes a question with more than one answer. Is it evidence? Is it debris? Is it heritage? Is it danger? Is it a grave marker without a name? The metal may be silent, but its appearance forces the present to decide what kind of past it is looking at. That decision is where the old war becomes a modern problem. The lower the water gets, the clearer the wrecks look, but the harder the choice becomes. Preserve them, remove them, study them, or leave them where history put them. At first, an exposed wreck can look like a discovery, a shape in the mud, a line of rust where the river should be. Metal ribs, broken plating, the outline of something built for movement that has become completely still. But once the shock fades, the wreck stops being only an image from the past. It becomes something people may have to manage in the present. For river traffic, even a partly submerged object can matter. A modern river is not empty space. It is a working route with boats, barges, ports, bridges, channels, and people whose daily lives depend on water being deep enough, predictable enough to use. If a wreck sits close to a navigable path, low water can turn it from a hidden object into a visible obstacle. That does not mean every exposed shape is dangerous. It means every exposed shape has to be treated carefully until it is understood. For historians, the same wreck may be evidence. Its construction, its damage, its position, and its relation to older maps may help explain how a military retreat, an attack, an abandonment, or a deliberate sinking unfolded. But this is where the language has to stay disciplined. A rusted hull does not automatically tell us who sank it, why it sank, or what it carried. Those answers belong to records, inspections, and careful comparison, not to guesswork. For local communities, the wreck can be something else again. It may be a memory that older residents heard about but rarely saw. It may be a landmark that appears only when the river is low. It may be treated as a warning sign, a reminder that the landscape people use every day was once part of a battlefield. And in some cases, people may wonder whether a wreck is not only a machine, but a grave. That possibility changes the moral weight of the object. Scrap metal can be removed. A historical artifact can be protected. A possible resting place asks for a different kind of caution. This is why the Danube story is more complicated than the dramatic headline suggests. The strongest question is not that no one alive has ever seen this before. The stronger question is, why did a modern river still contain a buried battlefield? Because if the wrecks are real, and if they are tied to the war as reported, then they show how conflict can remain inside infrastructure long after the fighting ends. A river can return to trade. Towns can rebuild. Borders can change. New generations can grow up beside the water. And still, below the surface, the river may be carrying the unfinished material of an older catastrophe. There is also the environmental question, though it must be handled cautiously. Old metal breaks down. Paint, fuel residues, cargo, and river sediment can all become part of the conversation. None of those details should be assumed for a specific wreck without evidence. The responsible version of the story is not to declare an invisible emergency. It is to ask what has been identified, what remains uncertain, and who has the authority to decide what happens next. That decision can pull in many directions. Engineers may want a channel cleared. Preservationists may want documentation before anything is moved. Local residents may want the wreck left as a memorial, removed as an eyesore, studied so the rumors can finally be separated from the facts. The river itself adds pressure because the window may not stay open. When the water rises, the visible evidence can disappear again, and that is what makes drought such a strange historian. It does not explain the past, it exposes it. For a short time, the Danube lowers its surface and shows what was hidden. Then people have to decide whether they are looking at danger, heritage, debris, a grave, or a warning from a war. Never fully left the riverbed, but the Danube wrecks also point to something larger. If water can hide history, then every drought becomes a temporary window, and every window eventually closes. That is what makes these wrecks feel larger than the ships themselves. They are not only pieces of wartime metal appearing in mud, they are reminders that rivers carry more than water. They carry old crossings, abandoned equipment, buried embankments, lost cargo, damaged bridges, and traces of conflict that ordinary life eventually learns to pass over. The fact is simple. When the level drops, objects near the surface can become visible. The meaning is more complicated. A rusted hull can be evidence, warning, heritage, inconvenience, or memory, depending on who is looking at it. Some researchers and historians describe rivers as a kind of moving archive, not because they preserve the past perfectly, but because they keep rearranging what people leave behind. Sediment covers something, currents uncover it, a channel shifts, a dry season changes the angle of sight. Then, briefly, the riverbed becomes readable. This is not a story about something carefully hidden from the public. The concealment here is mostly physical. Depth, mud, current, and time did the work. That may be why the images are so unsettling. No locked door has been opened. No hidden room has been entered. The landscape itself has changed, and the past has come into view. Climate belongs in this story as context, but carefully. A single exposed wreck should not be treated as proof of one cause, one trend, or one simple explanation. What can be said more safely is that low water changes what a river reveals. Those moments force modern societies to look again at what lies inside their infrastructure, their trade routes, and their memories. The Danube is powerful in this story because it is ordinary and extraordinary at the same time. It is a working river, part of daily life. It is also a corridor through centuries of ambition, movement, violence, recovery, and forgetting. When the water is high, those layers are hidden beneath a surface that seems complete. When the water falls, the surface breaks, and the river shows that history was never as buried as it looked. So the final mystery is not only what lies under the Danube, it is what we do when the river lets us see it. A wreck can be studied, it can be moved, it can be protected, it can be left alone, but it cannot be made meaningless once it has appeared. The moment rust breaks through the mud, the past stops being an abstraction. It becomes a physical object in the present, asking for attention. When the Danube rises again, many of these shapes may slip back beneath the surface, but disappearing from view is not the same as being gone. The river can cover the ships again. It cannot erase the reason they matter. And the next time drought lowers the water, the Danube may reveal more than wreckage. It may reveal how much history is still waiting inside the places we think we already know. If stories like this matter, stay with the channel because some of the most important discoveries begin. The world suddenly stops hiding what was always there.